Do you do a takeoff briefing before going full throttle down the runway? We don't have to as private pilots in Part 91, but the airliners do it as a matter of course. And though I've never experienced a total loss of power on takeoff, I've had enough partial issues at low altitude to learn the importance of planning what to do. None of those plans include what's called the impossible turn. If you haven't heard of it, the impossible turn refers to a turn back to the airport for a safe landing after losing power shortly after takeoff. Have you tried this? Maybe you've actually pulled it off successfully too. Let's simulate it and see what happens. First of all, the takeoff conditions play a huge role in what this will look like. Let's get some of the worst possible conditions for a scenario. With the winds, we'll do something more or less standard with the direction close to down the runway, about 9 or 10 knots. Now, temperature plays a big role. The hotter the day, the higher the density altitude, and worse the performance. Let's set about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, about as hot as it gets here in summer in Maryland. Now, let's load up our airplane. We'll put in passengers, payload, and fuel that puts us at max gross weight for this Cessna, so we're heavy on a really hot day. By the way, I probably wouldn't attempt this takeoff on a shorter runway like this one at College Park, regardless of what the performance tables tell me. Older aircraft have trouble making those numbers anyways. But we're going to try it doing a short field takeoff here. We'll lift off at 55 and pitch for VX around 60, barely clearing the trees in the metro down there. Now, for the engine out scenario, we're going to fail our engine at around 700 AGL. To add some realism, we're not going to immediately respond to the engine failure. This is a surprise, right? If you've seen the Sully movie, you remember the scene where they recreate the flight in the sim. You see that their success depends in large part on whether or not they're anticipating the failure. So we'll simulate a surprise and wait a full 3 seconds after the engine quits before acting. Because our climb performance is so diminished in these scenarios, we've gotten pretty far away from the field by the time we reach 700. So here's 700 feet. We pull the mixture and the engine quits. We'll count out 3 seconds, during which time we go, "Oh no, our engine quit," or something to that effect, and begin a turn back in. We need to keep the nose low to maintain a good glide airspeed and not get too slow to worry about a stall. Even though we're reversing course here, you could see from the ForeFlight track that it's not the same as a simple 180. The 180 turn puts us parallel with the runway, but we need to turn past this to get back on the extended centerline. Anytime we're in the turn diminishes our ability to hold altitude since we lose some vertical component of lift. You can tell pretty quickly that this just won't work out. We're going to be making an unannounced arrival on campus at the University of Maryland, and hopefully we could find a place that's not crowded for a forced landing. Not ideal, especially since there were more open fields in front of us on departure that we could have aimed for. I'm sure there'll be comments like, "Yeah, but I've made the impossible turn in more normal conditions," or something like that, so let's try that too. We'll use the current conditions here in College Park. The winds are light, and it's a bit warm for January, but nothing crazy. Our aircraft is loaded a few hundred feet below max gross too, so it's a more normal scenario. We won't do a short field takeoff on this one, so we'll leave flaps up and climb out at VY around 75 knots. We climb faster in these conditions and we'll reach 700 feet closer to the runway than we did in the first scenario. Here's the engine failure. Oh no, what happened? We have to turn back. We pitch for glide, and this time we're high enough that we can actually see the runway, and that we might have a chance to make it. The dorms and apartments are below us, but we're clearing them for now. It's going to be close, so we're going to try to stretch our glide, but this gets us too slow, close to stall, and now we risk a loss of control spin accident, much less survivable than a straight-ahead crash into the trees. Well, we were actually able to plan it just off the right side of the runway, and in this fantasy world of the sim, we could just continue the rollout onto the taxiway as if we meant to do it the whole time. The point here is not to show you that this does or doesn't work. It's to show you that the matter is very much in doubt until the very end, even on the best of days. Trying the impossible turn puts unnecessary risk on yourself and those on the ground, and increases the odds of a loss of control accident. It's much better to brief prior to takeoff that below 1,000 feet or something you'll attempt a landing straight ahead than rely on that turn back to the runway.